The American Civil War was the country's greatest tragedy. It killed some 600,000 people, displaced millions, and probably the worst of all, it created a rift in the nation that never really went away. The war lasted for nearly 5 years and devastated much of southern United States. But if the Union had won the initial battles, the war might have ended in a matter of weeks, when compromises might have still been possible. That didn't happen because of a single stubborn lad. Hi, my name is Sebastian, and you're watching Mistakes That Changed the World. In the early battles of the Civil War, both sides struggled to comprehend and execute orders. However, some were better armed than others, and that made the difference. Due to the Union's larger industrial capabilities, most people today have the impression that the Union Army was always better equipped. Certainly that was the case until 1861, but due to a bad call made by James Wolfe Ripley, the Chief of Ordnance of the US Army, the beginning of the war caught the Union with unmodernized weapons. The story goes like this. In July 1861, Ripley took over the leadership of the department responsible for acquiring all the weapons and equipment used by the Union Army and Navy. He was a 67-year-old brigadier general who had fought in the War of 1812 against the Creek and Seminole tribes under the command of Andrew Jackson, as well as in the Mexican-American War. This man was clearly a veteran that knew what he was doing. He had worked in ordnance and supply for over 30 years before becoming the head of the service. Ripley was brought in because his predecessor had proved ineffective and resistant to change. Unfortunately for the Union forces, Ripley turned out to be even worse. So what exactly happened? Well, right at the beginning of the war, before the First Battle of Bull Run, in July 1861, the British had just finished equipping their own army with the new Enfield rifles. This left them with their depots filled to the brim with nearly 100,000 muskets in perfect working order. The British immediately contacted Ripley, and since it seemed that the US government would quickly need a lot of weapons, they made an offer. But Ripley firmly and immediately said no. There were several reasons why the Chief of Ordnance didn't want to take the British muskets. After all, he did fight against the British in the War of 1812. And in addition, there was also the matter of national pride. The stated reason for refusing the weapons was, "We buy in America." He also believed that the new rifle muskets would encourage poor fire discipline and waste ammunition. To top it all off, there was also a suspicion that Ripley personally profited from limiting purchases to American-made arms. He held shares in a US arms company. The real reason, however, as his actions demonstrated, was that the man who had decided for 2 years what the Union Army would fight with was simply obstinate and resistant to any change. The Confederacy, however, had no such issues. When Ripley refused the British muskets, they were immediately seized by the Confederate Army. This meant that in the early months of the war, while the Union struggled to find the right ammunition for a wide range of muskets of different calibers, Confederate troops were armed almost entirely with fairly modern muskets of the same caliber. In those early months, they were better armed and more easily supplied than the Union forces they were fighting against. James Wolfe Ripley stubbornly resisted new ideas and weapons until he was finally dismissed from office in September 1863. In those 2 years, he opposed firearms with breech-loading mechanisms, refused to purchase repeating rifles like the Spencer or other brands, and prevented the army from acquiring any substantial number of Gatling guns. Ripley didn't cause the North the victory, but he did make it harder to achieve it by refusing the most modern weapons and equipment. And it seemed he had no other real reason than his own aversion to anything new or different. In a war that marked the emergence of modern weaponry, the decisions of the Chief of Ordnance actually delayed the Union's victory more than the mistakes of any general. I hope this video was interesting enough to have inspired you to look into it further on your own. If you liked it, leave a like and subscribe. Leave your comments downstairs, and you can also check out my Patreon page if you want to support me. I do hope to see you next time. Bye.